Hi everyone. Today I've got Penny Marie from Let Kids Be Kids, as you can see on the caption there. Penny started a group to help protect children in New Zealand, and she's interested in getting parents and grandparents and aunties and uncles, everyone who's interested in keeping kids safe here in New Zealand. Um, so anyway, I'll pass over to Penny and let her describe who they are, why they started, and what they do.
Thanks, Katrina, and I really appreciate your time today. Yeah, so I was looking into where the gender ideology was coming through the school curriculum back in early 2023, because I was looking at what was going on in America, like many of us, and we were seeing a shift in behavior and attitudes and some weird things going on with our children. And I experienced some of that in my own life with my own children. And we couldn't really find it here. And so I went to my school board and I spoke because I was talking to a lot of parents who had concerns, and they didn't realize that actually in New Zealand we have the right to go and speak in a school board meeting as a member of the public. So I went along and did that, and I recorded it, and it was really just to show parents how to be brave and that they do have a voice and that they can go and speak in their school. So that went out online, and lots of people saw it, and lots of people then contacted me saying that they felt the same and they really wanted some help. So what really came out of that was firstly, people didn't really understand what was going on because the schools weren't being transparent. And secondly, they didn't know how to find their voices. And it's astounded me how hard it is for people to write a letter, send an email, approach the board, speak out about it. I found out not too long ago that back in the 90s, when Tomorrow's Schools came in, apparently that's when the ministry decided that because Tomorrow's Schools was going to be so great, there wasn't a need for parent advocacy anymore. And this is what I've just heard anecdotally through a lawyer, is that they then kind of disbanded the parent advocacy component of the Ministry of Education. Now, I was a student in the 90s, and so there's a few generations that have gone through until we have our own kids at school, and it's normalized that parents don't have a voice in school. And then we've seen that really since 2020, 2021, when we've been used to being excluded out of school meetings because, with the lockdowns and everything, is that there's a real disconnect now between parents and schools. And we always thought that it was a community situation. So that's
Wow.
kind of the background to Let Kids Be Kids and how we've come to sort of hear the parents and then find ways to inform the parents and then support them. Mm.
Well, that would explain quite a lot why schools can keep the their promulgation of gender identity a secret from parents because they no longer communicate with parents. As you say, the parent advocacy has gone by the board. So
Yeah,
that's quite disturbing, actually.
it is. And the Ministry of Education Relationship and Sexuality Guidelines states really clearly in there that schools are required to consult with their local community, being the parents, at least every 2 years on the sex ed, because it is the topic that parents, well, under law, under the Education and Training Act, they actually have the right to withdraw their children if they don't want them in that part of the curriculum. So it's the only part of the curriculum which in legislation parents can remove them from. So you would think that, seeing as the government actually says that, the Ministry of Education says that schools would then be transparent in their consultation rounds. And so what we've found around the country is there's very few schools that are being transparent in the consultation rounds about what's being taught. So when more parents are asking, we're really coming up against it. And also that the consultations often are now being done online rather than in room. So when I went to one about 4 or 5 years ago, we went to a meeting in the school, and it was the most attended parent meeting apart from prize givings, because parents actually care about this topic. And now just about all of the schools that we've come across, they're doing their consultation via email, and then that's reducing the amount of engagement because we're all overwhelmed. And then also what I feel really strongly is that when the only option is to respond via email, you're not watching the room. You're not seeing that there's other parents there who've got the same concerns as you. It's increasing this isolation of voice. So you don't know. I've had so many parents contact us saying, I think I'm the only one in my whole school who thinks this is wrong, because you can't find one another, particularly in a high school setting where you're less likely to be at the school gate. So I just feel like we've become very disconnected. So this topic is really important, but it's hard for us to find one another to talk about it.
Mm.
Mm.
That's so important, isn't it? That face to face, getting together with people. The
Mm.
emails, I understand why people don't respond to emails. I mean, as you know, I mean, I write a Substack blog, and it can take me hours to write something. By the
Mm.
time I find, links and backing up what I write and things like that, it can take me hours to write something that takes people a few minutes to read. So,
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
you have to articulate it all. So I can understand that. At the end of the day, you get an email. You've been to work, you get an email. They want you to respond to something, which you then have to sort of go through the processes, step by step process in your head, working out, now, what does this mean? How do I want to respond to it? How do I articulate it and put it all down? It isn't easy, but when you get into a face-to-face environment with people, you often find that you can talk it a lot
Yeah.
better than you can write it. And especially when other people are talking and the ideas bounce around and you get
Mm.
snippets of information you mightn't have otherwise had. So that is so important. And I believe that I don't think it's sort of a conspiracy to not do that, but I think also I do believe that it is a bit of a tactic, because
Mm.
authorities do realize that people are less inclined to respond by email and go
Mm.
online and that sort of thing than they are to sort of talk about it face to face. So that suits them a lot better for that, to get the
Well,
minimal respondents. Yeah.
and I feel like we're kind of at that point now where society is very disconnected, and we need to remember the ancient times. So before we had digital, how did we share information? How did we communicate, and how did we support one another? So back in the ancient times, it was very tribal. So you would sit in circle and everyone would get to have a say. How often does even debate happen these days? And so, if you go to a school meeting and I did when I went to my school meeting about the sex ed back when my kids started high school, that it was all about consent. And so I put my hand up and said, well, but nowadays with phones, there's a whole lot that happens prior to consent. So what are you doing about porn? Because we have to be realistic that porn is a factor of their lives. And they said, oh, we're not teaching about it. The concerning things for me is that in the current guidelines, there's a lot about porn. And they're actually, I believe, leveraging the fact that kids have online to then say, well, because they're watching porn, we then have to educate them on porn. And some of the materials that I've seen where they're showing kids about porn is actually pathwaying them to porn. It's not making them think that porn's an issue. It's actually celebrating porn. And that's a real concern, because to me, that's breaking the law, because you shouldn't be showing any graphic content to children that are under the legal age for sex. Um, and the other thing is that, oh, sorry, there was something I was going to say. Yeah, the consultation that they do, which the Ministry of Education requires them to do, from what I have experienced, the ones that do go and do consultation, they don't do anything with that consultation. They're still just going to trolley along with their plan. It doesn't actually change the outcome. So it's paying lip service to consultation. It's not true consultation. And that's a really big point is, we go out there. When I did my board speech in May, they said to me, oh, we're going to be consulting in December. Well, at a high school, I mean, school's out in December, but that's after the education has already happened in term 3. So I required that they bring it forward, which they did. Then we did the consultation on email, but nothing changed. They said, oh, well, only 15 people replied and off we go. But even if 50 people had replied, they still would have just done what they were doing.
I find the same thing. I've been engaged with the Christchurch City Council over some things, and I really have the same perception with them as well. Like, they've already decided before they do the engagement,
Yeah.
and ask for submissions, and they're just ticking a box. But
Mm.
on the subject of porn, I've heard what you've said about, oh, they're going to find it online anyway, so we might as well, whatever. And I think to myself, well, that's kind of like almost like giving permission
Yeah.
to watch it, and I think that if it's still made like it's something that you like shouldn't be doing, or whatever, however you want to phrase it, at least at least then that's in their minds, the kids' minds, that this is not something that's really okay. And if they do it quietly and secretly and everything like that, it's still in their minds. This is something that's not really permissible. And we're taking that away.
Yeah. The other thing that comes through a lot of the stuff that we're seeing is this drive to create a wedge between the parent and the child. So whether it's around, oh, this is an awkward topic, mum and dad might not want to talk about it, so we'll give you an agency that you can go and talk to about it. There's many ways that they're doing this. It's through the questioning of some of the wellness assessments that they're doing in school, such as the heads assessment, where they're actually asking the child to basically dob their parents in to create a wedge. And a lot of us parents who have experienced the fallout of that in our own lives are starting to understand that this didn't happen by accident. It's not just normal teenage behavior, which is what a lot of parents around me were saying at the time. This is an attempt to undermine the parental role, and particularly mum's role. And it's very prevalent when you really start looking. So then you can start to put some pieces together and go, oh, I see, we've got more, and not even talking about the gender stuff, but we've got more kids than ever out there now being activists and, going against their parents' values. And we're trying to figure out where it happened. And it's not in any one place. Like, it happens online. It happens in the education system. It happens in the mental health system. It happens right through society. It's a big thing. And parents are really struggling because and when it comes to bringing it down to the trans stuff, the messaging is better if they have a daughter who wants to transition, they're being told better a live son that's transitioned than a dead daughter. So the psychological manipulation on the parents to go along with this, even though their moral code would their whole body would be telling them this is wrong, they're being framed as the problem, the parents.
Yeah, I mean, when we were young, of course, we rebelled against our parents. It's a rite of passage for young people. But parents still maintained an element of control and authority. And we're hearing now that there are places like, and I'm not going to say all schools because I've heard of some schools that deal with things very well, but there are some, like perhaps individual teachers within schools that will actually encourage students to disrespect their parents, and to not just rebel against them, as young people do, but to actually sort of discredit them completely, sort of, as you say, drive that wedge.
Yeah, I'd like to show you something actually. Can I just share my screen with you, if that's okay?
Sure.
On this topic. So this is in a document that we go through, that Elizabeth Cave, who's speaking alongside me in the presentations that we're doing through the South Island. So this is in some of the mental health haora activities that are being used in some schools that the Ministry of Health has created. And this is just one of the activities where it's saying get together in a group and ask all these questions, get them to talk about choosing a career or study path that their parents disagree with, a teen that wants to follow a different eating pattern, a teen that wants to go camping, but their parents think they're too young. So you can see here the psychological manipulation to actually pitching, they're looking for the problem, like where in this are they helping children to engage with their family and respect their family values. But it's done through subtle means, and this seems not so subtle when you look at it with a questioning mind, question after question about all the ways that they're just making a presumption that the parent is going to disagree with what the child wants to say. So these are the kinds of things.
Sorry, carry on.
Yeah, these are the kinds of things that are happening, and we don't know, and we wouldn't even be consulted with on this because it's not actually part of the relationship and sexuality guidelines. It's part of the mental well-being stuff that's coming through schools now.
Yeah. And, looking at this, I'm thinking to myself that an uninformed person would look at that and it's worded in such a way that it doesn't really sound that bad. You
Mm.
know, it just sort of sounds, yeah, just not too awful or anything like that as I'm looking at it, but actually say there's this constant pattern of actually sort of trying to go against your parents,
Yeah,
as you say, and instead of sort of saying things like, well, how can you work with them, and
yeah,
that, so it's
yeah.
interesting. Yes,
It's
I
not
think
starting,
the
if you think about it, like it's not starting from a neutral place of of sort of really wanting there to be a close family connection. You
yes,
know, like these sorts of questions I would think would come up when a child presents as saying that they are having an issue at home, and maybe then you would start to ask, you know, to unpack in the detail, but you don't present this to a child who may, or you don't even know what their family situation is, and then start putting ideas in their head really to actually think about ways to undermine their parents.
that's right. I mean, this here is like basically saying to kids, get together, and then that but basically saying there's a problem, get
Yes.
together and talk about the problem and create a big problem. They're not saying they're basically saying, how can you fix this by going against your parents?
Yeah.
What's the fix there? Yeah, which
Yeah.
to go against your parents, not to work with them. So that's very
Yeah.
interesting, as you say, and it's written in such a way, as I said, an uninformed person looking at it would just they might feel a bit of disquietude about it, but not be
Mm.
able to pinpoint it or
Mm.
articulate it. And it's because it's nothing that's like really bad. So it's quite clever. I found that the narrative around all um, this kind of thing, let's call it wokeness or whatever, I found the narrative is extremely clever, very,
Mm.
very clever. It's made to look very plausible, but
Yeah.
it's actually done by quite sort of expert people,
Yeah.
content
Yeah.
makers. Yeah.
It is, and that's exactly why we have Elizabeth speaking with us, because she's an expert in that area. She's got a degree in the philosophy of education, and she really brings the magic sauce to what we're presenting with Let Kids Be Kids, which has been really helpful. So that's just a part of her presentation where she sort of talks about that. And like you say, you could see that thing in isolation and be like, well, it's not that bad, but it's little tiny threads of manipulation, really. Mm.
Yeah. And I
Mm.
think that going back to the uh, relationships and sexuality education guidelines, and you were saying that parents should have the authority to take their children out of those classes. But what I'm hearing, and I don't, and I is this what's happening? Is that it's actually been permeated through all the classes. So it's actually becoming hard to take your child out of one class.
Yes, that's exactly right. So if you look at the relationship and sexuality education guidelines themselves, they state in there that what they desire, the Ministry of Education, is that a school would thread this stuff through the entire curriculum. And that's from year one all the way up. And so when I did my speech, I just say to people, ask questions, because the school itself, or the teachers that are teaching this, they actually have some autonomy around what they're teaching, like what level they'll go to. But
Mm,
when I asked the question, I wanted to see where it was throughout the whole curriculum, because in theory, under the way I interpret it is, under the Education and Training Act, they say that you can opt your child out if you don't agree with it because of, you know, religious or cultural reasons or whatever, that you can say, I don't want my child to receive sexual education. Then they say they're going to thread it through the curriculum. So in theory, we should be able to ask where in the whole curriculum it is, and we should be able to ask for an option throughout it. Now, in my situation, I discovered that it was in one of my children's year 12 legal studies paper. Okay, so that's an example. And I asked them why, and I asked for the information, and they clammed up on me and they said that due to copyright, I wasn't allowed to look. Now, that's, to me, that's a complete undermining of the parent, because they're using copyright as their excuse to not be transparent. Now, I experienced that, and I've talked to other parents who have experienced that. So they're making it almost impossible for us to know what's going on with our children around this topic, to the point where things are being taught that, one, we don't know about, and two, we may disagree with fundamentally as a family. I believe that there are only two genders, that you're either born male or female, and that there are a small percentage of the population who are born intersex, which means that they have atypical genitalia. The LGBTQ plus pride movement have captured those people as well and lumped them all in with this agenda. So if that's my belief as a parent, that should supersede what the government wants to try and tell my children. That is what I regard to be a pseudoscientific approach. So I should be able to opt my child out of any part of the curriculum where they talk about gender being fluid, where your birth sex is assigned by a doctor, and any narrative which talks about non-binary or all these what I consider to be made up terms. Mm. But they make it impossible in the schools where it's embedded throughout the curriculum. Yeah.
Yeah, and I hear what you're saying about the copyright thing because that seems to, I don't know if it's a tactic or it's a lack of resources or whatever, but they seem to be outsourcing to other organizations to get their information from. Yes. And then they can claim the copyright thing about not sharing it.
Yes, that's what we found too, is that back in the day, and when I knew teachers back when I was young in my career, they would work really hard to create their own resources. Teachers create their own resources, they do their own research, they tweak it every year, and they have their own material. Now, what's happening in a lot of areas now, and not just in health, so in the sex ed, the Ministry of Education promoted resources at the moment, Navigating the Journey are resources that you buy them off the shelf, and teachers use them, and thereby family planning, which has now been renamed Sexual Wellbeing Aotearoa. So it's a buy it off the shelf, ready-made resource for busy teachers. Now, these sorts of resources are being created for other curriculum areas, such as legal studies, technical things, and sometimes that's okay. But what you've then got is a teacher who's just regurgitating something that a corporation has made these resources, and they're buying them off the shelf, and they're just running kids through a program. They're not actually educating them from their own experience. So there's been a big shift, and online, like pre-made resources is training rather than education. And I'm really sad to realize that, because when my kids were in school, one of the phrases that came out is we're all about educating our children to be critical thinkers. Well, if you look around society now, I would question that, whether the young people coming out right now are critical thinkers. Are they able to have balanced debate? Are they able to listen to another point of view and receive that, and then be willing to say, with that evidence, maybe I need to rethink that? Are we creating critical thinkers with the current educational structure?
Mm-hmm. I think that's quite questionable, to be honest. To go back to, I think in the beginning, you said something about, was it that you noticed your own child's behavior was changing? And you said other parents were noticing that. What kind of changes were you noticing? Are you able to say? I don't mind if you don't want to say.
Yeah. So I had a son who was very sporty, very academic, very popular. He was the light of the party. He was just, he's an awesome kid. He aligned with a minority group, and then over time his mental health was declining, and then he became really fixated on that minority group. And then he wanted to socialize only with that minority group. And then he was upset because our school was conservative and didn't have many people from that minority group. And so where could he go? And I remember saying to him, and he was 15, 16 at this time, but, I don't need to align with a minority group to find people that just enjoy speaking about things that I enjoy. Like, look to your interests, look to your passion areas, look to, the other facets of what you're interested in. Why are you fixating on this one? And again, I mean, I've come to see that there's lots of facets that contributed to that, and addiction to what's going on online is a big piece of that. I don't think a huge part of it for him was really coming through the school system. And when those of us who have children that were locked up in the lockdowns, online was something that we opened the door to more. So I was very strict with online use and app use prior to 2020. But then when the kids were locked up at home and the only way that they could reach their friends was online, we all let our guard down because we didn't want to contribute to their mental well-being by isolating them further, right? By restricting their time online. And it seems to be that a lot of this narrative around the gender, but also around activism in general, has come through over those years. So that those of us who have got teens or late teens now, we've seen a pattern where since 2021-ish, some stuff was probably going on online that we were not aware of. So what happened in my life was my son, and we'd always had a very close and open relationship, became very secretive with his phone, like to the point where it destroyed our family because I tried to be the parent, realizing that it was one of the pathways that was destroying him. And I put boundaries in place, and he literally would rather move out of my house than give up his phone. And I talk to parents all around the country for whom this is happening. And then the harmful thing is that when you go and seek help for that, so among your peers, I was told, oh, it's just normal, typical teenage behavior. I'm like, you don't understand what's going on here. I can see the change in my son. And then we went to help. We went to help through mental health and psychologists. And what was the final nail in the coffin for me and my son's relationship was sitting with a psychologist who told him and I that it was my fault and that I was controlling. And that just gave him every tool in his toolbox to blame me. See, this goes back to the whole victim mentality. He wasn't taking responsibility for his own actions. And then when he hears from an accredited professional that it's my fault, well, that's all the ammo he needs.
Yeah.
And this is happening everywhere. It's my story is definitely a common one.
Yeah. So I understand that the behavior is kind of rooted in normal teenage behavior. It's kind of rooted in that, but it's become bigger than that, hasn't it? And I think that's what people aren't seeing, is that it may be rooted in that normal teenage behavior, whatever, but it's grown much bigger than that.
Yeah, it's like what you said before when we were looking at that screen. They're very smart in what they've done, so they can feather it and make things seem normal, but then I believe they kind of attach a nefarious thing to it. So, this normal, I mean, we all rebelled against our parents when we were teenagers. So there's a point that you kind of go, well, this is how they flex their wings. This is how they're coming into their own identity. So as a parent, you're always balancing, I was always trying to balance protection with giving them wings. Like, what do you allow them to fall on so that they learn the lesson versus what are you willing to protect them from so that they don't get harmed? And that's the battle as a parent, that at every age and stage you have to let them fall more, which is tough, right? So you're doing all of that as a good parent anyway, but they being whoever, whatever you're looking at, whether it's people that are developing apps that are targeted at your children, whether it's people that are targeting your children through their content, whether it's what's coming through the teaching materials, there is very little out there that supports a teenager or a child going to their parent and respecting their parent as their primary protector and loved one and connector in the world. And they particularly get the kids that don't have really strong parental role models, so the more vulnerable children. And in particular, I've learned a lot now about like predatory behavior. And one of the key things that a predator will do is they will look for the children that don't have a strong male role model in their life. And that's a really key one, because many kids don't, because split families or, divisive relationships with particularly their dad, but obviously their mum's really important too. But in my situation, they didn't have a very strong male role model in their life. Single mums are often trying to be both, which is never it's never ideal, right? So there's a whole lot of things, right? So you kind of realize that while a parent is trying to do their very best in a world that's really not pro family and not pro that parental relationship, you're fighting an uphill battle. That's why the way that we look at it with Let Kids Be Kids is we're very much grassroots. We're very much like, we need to all figure this out together. No one's going to come save us. No one's going to come save our relationship with our kids. Nothing in policy really at the moment is supporting that. The example of Family First being removed off the charities register, that they're an organisation who are pro-family. They're trying to reinforce the strength of the family unit, and they get removed off the charities. You've got to question all of this. So we're very much like, we have to have these conversations. We have to find people in our networks to trust. We have to share the hard stories, because we have to know that this is real. It's not just some fantasy land, far away story that's happening on the other side of the world, you know. I mean,
that's right.
when I started on this journey, I didn't even realize how big this was. And I had to really, I have to do a lot of inner work to protect myself, because I'm hearing really heartbreaking stories every day. And that's the reality of it. You know, I got a message last night that a young girl who was transed in New Zealand a few years ago just took her life this week. This is real, you know, this is what's happening in our community. And this is why we're traveling around the country, because we need to pull people together. We need to not just be doing this online. We need to look one another in the eye, and we need to support one another. You
Yeah,
know, and if you
absolutely. That face-to-face thing. Once again, we go back to that. Yeah,
have got to go
face-to-face in
offline.
person. Yeah.
Yeah. And what I say too is, if you're a strong and confident person, and if you have some time, put your hand up to help. There are parents that are going into board meetings or trying to communicate with their board and they're all on their own. You know, when I went in and spoke to my board, I had 3 people come and be with me, and that's just I didn't need them to speak for me. I just needed the moral support, and the school needed to see that I wasn't just one crazy mother. Catherine, who did her speech after mine, and that's up on our pages as well. She goes to church, so she went to her church and she asked them to support her. She had 20 people from her church standing in support with her in the room when she spoke to the board. Like, that sends a powerful message, doesn't it? That the community has a concern and we are willing to stand together. So more than anything right now, people need to be visible. They need to support one another.
And what I'll say right now, and I'll try and remember to say it at the end as well, is that I will put links to your website and different links maybe that we talk about in the description below. Now, if the URLs don't work, and sometimes they just don't seem to embed there, you can copy and paste them into a browser to find the places that we're mentioning. There's one thing I want to mention. You talked about, how predators, and we know that, unfortunately, we know that most predators are male, that they do target families without a strong male presence, and whether that's a father or whether it's sort of a wider male presence or whatever. And I'm just sort of wondering, because men know men, and this is what I find interesting, is that how so many women they don't know men, but men know men, and they know that if there's no strong male presence there, they know that they're in, because if there's a strong male presence there, they know that he's going to be standing between them and his family. Now, I'm just wondering that, and I'm not saying that women don't, but I'm just saying that, men know that men will. And in Let Kids Be Kids, are you finding that there's a lot of men also coming along or joining up with you?
So we do have great men, and there's one interview that I've done with a dad down in Dunedin, and he shares his story of how he changed his whole life really, and reignited his relationship with his daughter because he realized that he needed to stand up now or else. It's harder to get the men to speak up. I really want to do a men's panel actually with some amazing men around the place who are speaking up. They feel stuck too. A lot of them feel stuck because they know that if they say anything that they get called names as well, and they get labeled as misogynistic and all of those things. And my challenge to men is, let them call you the names. We actually need you to stand up. We need you to support your children and other people's children, but we actually also need you to support us women who are standing up, because we know we're in the front line and we need you. It makes me really emotional actually, but what we've actually been doing on this tour is we've received quite a lot of, well, we haven't received a lot of hate. We've received an element of hate from a very small portion of the population. And so we've actually reached out to some communities and groups and actually asked the men to come along to support us and to be our security. I mean, it's ridiculous that we have to do this when actually all we're doing is sharing government information and real true stories of what's going on in our homes.
It's quite
This is
galling,
where we've
really,
gotten
isn't
to.
it, that we need to do that?
It is, but you know what? The men have shown up, and I really thank them and support them and encourage them. And I do have to do a shout out. We're not religiously or politically affiliated at all. We're just a group of parents. But the group that has shown up to a couple of our meetings and just been incredible are the Man Up team, which come out of Destiny Church. So those guys have shown up to our meetings and will continue to do so. And they've shown up, they've helped us set up the room, they've stood outside on security in case anything happens, and then they've walked us to our cars at the end of the night. So I want to do a shout out to those guys because it felt, what it did for us as the women, the mothers who were up there speaking, is we felt really enveloped, we felt really protected, and we felt really nurtured. And the men need to know the importance of their role in society, because that is your role. You know, you're there to protect and be the guardians of us, and us mums, you know, we're the ones that are brave enough to speak up. And some dads are brave enough to speak up, but by and large, it's been the woman. But I do make a real call out to the men now. We need you to show up to the meetings, you know, book a babysitter and come along with your partner. And show up, because you need to see. And then the men that have come have been really appreciative of this message, and yeah, they just tell us we've got to keep going. So massive shout out to the men. You know, it's unpicking the whole, you know, the feminism movement too. To me, the feminism movement was a bit of a hijack on the whole role of the feminine and the masculine, and it's actually demasculated men, and then it's actually pushed a lot of women into thinking that they need to take on the masculine role, and what we actually need is to bring that balance back. You know, the nurturer and the protector. That's what I've come to see anyway.
I mean, we don't want it to be so that we need men to come along to these things. I mean, who wants that? We'd like to be able to go along to these functions, these organizations, without needing men. And I know that feminism tried to sort of make that, you know, perhaps make that a thing. But you know what we found out was there's always people in the world, I'll give them half a chance, who will be hostile and aggressive and violent. And if there's nothing standing between them and their targets, you know, they just escalate it until they get to you. So that's unfortunate that you know, we can't. There are times in the world where we simply cannot, you know, go about without some protection. And as I said, it's galling. I don't like it, but it's let's not be unrealistic about that.
And I don't do it like when we've put the call out for the guys to show up and be a presence. I'm not doing it from a place of fear. I'm doing it from a place of people like to be shoulder tapped, and they like to be told that they're valued. Right. And so if they can come along and feel like they can play, because people just want to help, right? They just want to play a part. And so if their part is coming along and being present, you know, and it makes us feel very loved. So we're not doing it from fear. We're doing it from this is a community situation that we're in, and we would value your input. So yeah, very much always on looking at it at the positive. And yeah, we do need to see it happen. But you're right. It would be great to not think that we need to do that. But for now, you know, and I mean, again, it goes back to this whole what to me is very political, where activism seems to be the play of the day, and activism can often reduce itself to violence, and that's not what we're about. But that's like the mentality that's often out there, is if you don't like something about it, go raise some hell about it. And it's like, well, can we not just meet in a room and have a conversation?
Yes. So Penny, let's talk about your South Island tour now, because you started that a week ago, perhaps. Been to a few places, and now you're in Christchurch. And tomorrow night, Monday the 22nd of April, you'll be giving a presentation at Hey Hey, and the schedule for your talks will be on your website. Is that right?
Yeah. So we'll put all the links below, but we're on X and Facebook and Telegram, and also on our website. So we're kind of everywhere if you find us, but just go to letkidsbekids.nz. So yeah, this kind of came about because I love the people in the South. They do. It's the second time I've been around here speaking. I'm from the North Island, and so I have to do it kind of all in one hit, because I'm not funded, by the way. So any financial support to our organisation would be much appreciated. So there was someone in Blenheim that had asked me to come down a few times. And so I finally said, well, yes, I'll come down, because there was something else I wanted to do personally down here this month. And then someone in Greymouth had actually reached out to us last year, but had missed the meeting that we'd done over on the West Coast. So I contacted them and said, do you want me to come back? Is there still a need? And they said yes. So then I put it out to our network, and then the network itself just organised all the dates and events. Well, I gave them the dates that I would be able to get to places, and they went and organised. So it's very much a grassroots. Whoever in the town wants to book a hall and do some promotion, then we go. Very decentralized, very much like that. So we've ended up having, I think we're up to about 12 venues now, and we're still looking at a couple more in Central Otago. So we've done Hokitika, Greymouth, Nelson, Blenheim, Rangiora. We did Rangiora on Friday night, and then we're doing Christchurch on Monday, and then we go Ashburton, Timaru, Oamaru, Dunedin, Balclutha, Invercargill, Te Anau. And then we're looking to book Christchurch and Wanaka as well.
Christchurch.
So there's clearly a need, right?
Queenstown. Do you mean Queenstown or?
Oh, sorry, Queenstown and Wanaka. Yeah, we're looking at finishing there. So, so what it shows is that people really need some help, and they really appreciate this. So
I take it when you have these venues, you're not getting empty halls or empty rooms.
No, we're not getting empty rooms. Yeah, yeah. But it does rely on just sharing the word, because obviously we don't have an advertising budget or anything like that. It's literally just a word of mouth. And what we really say is, we would love you to bring someone along who may not really understand what's going on, or who may have experienced some distress in their own family and want some answers. So, oftentimes we get most of the people that come already kind of know, and they don't really know as much as what we can show them, which is awesome. And we equip them so that they can go out and share and be brave enough to find their voices and help in their communities. But if we can get some people brave enough to, at every meeting we've had people going, oh, I wish I had brought 5 friends along. So I would say, don't live in regret, because we're only in the town each one day, is actually, and we've had other people coming and saying, oh, can you come up to this town? Can you come up to this town? And yes, another time, but our schedule is really full. We're either driving or speaking. So yeah.
So I take it you've got a truckload of information you can share. So how long are these meetings generally running for?
Yeah, so it's a full 2-hour presentation with lots of information, and and we've even had support from New Zealand First. So we've had New Zealand First people coming along to our meetings, and they have learnt some stuff as well, which has been amazing. And they and I was just on the phone to some of them this morning, and they want us to go through the North Island. So New Zealand First's campaigned very strongly on getting rid of the current relationship and sexuality education in the schools. What we talk about is a lot bigger than just that issue, obviously, but we also join some dots as to why this is happening and where it's come from, which is really important to understand right now, and also that in history it's happened before.
Interesting.
Mm.
So people do go away with full knowledge of what you're about, what's happening, etc., and perhaps where they can make contacts with other people in their communities, and that sounds great.
And I wouldn't say full knowledge, because this like the hard thing for us is how to fit what we know into just 2 hours. So we actually just give them a taster, and there's so much information coming out right now very rapidly about the CAS report and the pathophiles and all of those things. So we do touch on the WPATH file, sorry. And most of the people in the room don't know about that stuff yet. So we just kind of touch on it, and people are sending us stuff every day with more and more revealing stuff, but we can't even add that in. Like, it's kind of a first touch for people to really see the bigger picture. And I really believe too, I stay really positive, but I believe too that the whole agenda is collapsing. That the harm that is coming on our children is being exposed, and that because New Zealand's media is so shut down, and the Ministry of Health is trying to deny it at this point, by the sounds of it, it seems like we're still at the beginning part of exposing it here, but globally it appears that the narrative is collapsing, which is fantastic.
Yeah, I agree. So I do hear that I do realize that you've had some pushback against your tour. And this is from the Rainbow Storytime people or person, or the person who runs that, Sunita Torrance, is that correct?
Yeah, and I'll just share it because I don't want to focus on this and give them much airtime, but I'll just share it because it's important for people to understand how intense the fight that is, really, I suppose, let's call it a fight. So this is just some of the screenshots. So what we discovered on the first night in Hokitika, the woman who organized the event, she just put a reminder out on the local Facebook group for Hokitika, which has about 11,000 people. And within about 10 minutes, she had, and they're the ones on the right-hand side that you can see, saying that we are the ones causing hate and doing all the things. And this lady, Sunita Torrance, she is the black-haired drag queen, the female drag queen in the duo for Rainbow Storytime NZ that's been in the media a lot lately around the cancellation of the drag queen storytimes in the libraries. Now, the drag queen storytimes in the libraries is a very, it's not really part of our presentation. I think we spend about 1 minute on it. It's not the topic. But she jumped on the Hokitika page and she tried to tell us that we were the bad people. Now, it says here, the absolute shambles of it being titled Let Kids Be Kids when they are the ones telling kids who they cannot be, which is, she's blatantly lying. She's clearly trying to protect her narrative. Now, we've done an analysis, and Katrina, you were just saying you were looking at it before we jumped on. We've done an analysis on this lady and her business partner, or her partner in the Rainbow Storytime, onto who they really are. And they're running a business for profit, and the Rainbow Storytime is a part of that. And Erica, who's the other part of the duo, he's a professional protester. And they also have been the people that founded some of the pride organisations in Taranaki. So the other piece here is that this lady doesn't live in the South Island. She actually lives in Taranaki. But it appears that she's jumped on the local Facebook groups of the areas that we're going to, and she's putting up all the stuff. So the one on the left there, that was in Blenheim. So she jumped on the Blenheim group, and she then says, I am currently ringing every venue to ask them to cancel our roadshow, which she has proceeded to do. And then it says it's really inappropriate holding this one was being held in a church hall. So she contacted the church and tried to scare them into shutting them down because she thinks that her narrative is Jesus's way and our narrative isn't. So she's wielding that one. So that's what's been going on. So we've been dealing with that. We've also dealt with there's an email that came through from the staff reporter saying we've received complaints that you are peddling hatred and vitriol. And so they're going to publish an article about us based on the complaints. Now, this would be the woman who's putting the complaint in. It's not actually anyone. Well, there were some activists that came to our Greymouth meeting who were obviously there to disrupt. And so they were asking us some challenging questions, which we were able to answer. And we're also just there to inform, like we also say at the start, we're not talking about what adults choose to do with adult bodies. What we're talking about is the years in which a child should be under their parental authority, which is from prior to birth to 16 years old. So we're talking about that. We are not a hate group. We are not anti-trans. And I even include in our presentation a snippet of an interview that I did with a trans man where he says that what his journey is choosing to do this as an adult and how that worked, and then what's happening with our children today. So very important to understand that Let Kids Be Kids is not a hate group. We're not anti anybody. We look at the data and we present that information in a balanced way so that parents can make a decision, and they can choose to disagree with us. That's fine. But this here is an example of people who think that they're pushing the kindness message, and they think that we're pushing the hate message, but it's clear to kind of everyone what's really going on here. So they have been, doing what they can to disrupt our tour, which is why it's good to have normal, everyday members of the community actually being brave enough to support us. So we're on the front lines here, and we're fine about that because we know that's what we're here to do.
Yeah. This is what's happening throughout the media, the mainstream media, so much, isn't it? There's that biased, one-sided reporting all the time,
Yes.
and it's very discouraging. And they wonder why they have faith in them is falling, and all that. So have
They're
you had
just
any
exposing
media?
themselves, right? Yeah.
Have you have any media at all sort of talk report about your tour or anything like that?
So we had a journalist on the West Coast interview me, and she was really balanced, and she put a little community notice out, but it was only in print, and I haven't actually seen whether that went out. I've had the Rangiora guy, he placed an ad in the Canterbury News, and that went in, which was good. No media coverage, no one's come to any of our events. The guy in Rangiora was trying to get us on the local radio station and they didn't want to listen. I reached out to Reality Check Radio prior to our tour starting, asking if they would help us to speak about it, and then they went off air that day. So not
Yes.
that that was related to me, but that was just the timing of it, was that they would have, but they went off air. So no, we've had to do this promotion ourselves using our tools, which is online, but that's also where we get a lot of the people that are opposing us, and then literally just beating the streets and printing flyers and being very grassroots about this. Yep. So we've been able to do this without any media attention. And with the stuff email that came through the other day, it's clear that any media attention will be labeling us as the misinformationists.
The mainstream media, at least. Yes. Yeah. So
Yep.
so that's all been done basically through your networks.
Yep.
And that, yeah.
Yep.
Well, that's really encouraging, isn't it? I mean, to me that shows, because one of the hard things is actually is to get anybody. People are interested, they're concerned, and things like that. But one of the hard things is to get people to actually do stuff. To
Yep.
step up and do stuff. So I find it very encouraging that you've got this network of people who've been willing to do that, to actually sort of do that, which shows a level. It shows that this is quite a high level of concern for people, that they're actually willing to get up and do something. That really is quite not remarkable, but that really is, when you see people willing to do something, that is there's a real level of concern there.
Particularly in New Zealand, because we are quite an apathetic nation, and we don't know, the tall poppy syndrome is really bad here, and it's actually very, very hard culturally to speak up. And I talk to a lot of people who are from overseas and they live here, lots of other cultures, and they all are just shocked that Kiwis just are really shut down. If we disagree with something, we just let it happen. And so, by being squeezed really into a position where organizations like us are relying on our networks, we're actually asking our networks to be brave. Drop the invitation to come to your local meeting into a chat group where you would normally not bother because you think you're going to get hated on. Start it's just a conversation starter. Let the feed do what it does. You don't have to justify yourself, but if you can just be brave enough to pop something into a community post, the rest will take care of itself. It will find the people it needs to find. I say to people, if you don't be brave right now about this topic, play this one out to the end. Which side of history do you want to be on? Do you want to be on the side of history where you tell your grandchildren that this was horrible thing was happening, but you were too scared because you thought someone might call you a name? Or will you say that I stood up no matter what? And yeah, I might have got hit in the face with a tomato, or I might have got someone hate me online, but I'm so glad that I did, because now you're here. And you might not be here if this was allowed to continue. We're at that point, and it sounds quite dramatic, but we're at that point where there's a hit on, our next generations. Children are really, our young people are being told a lot of scary things that make them not want to have children. Or
Yes,
this medication, and this transing, they're not going to be able to have children. So you think about that from a population point of view and our future generations. We have to stand up to this now.
yeah, I agree. I mean, I think that, being brave is almost like the best thing you can do right now.
Mm.
So anyway, on that note, let's hope that there's some brave people coming along to the rest of your meetings. And as I said, especially one tomorrow night, I'll just sort of see if I can adjust that sun coming in. But
You look like you've got sparkles on your forehead. That's lovely.
I'll say that.
Yeah, so we'd love to see you tomorrow night. And yeah, then look at our tour. If you just go on our website, we've got the whole list of the tour. We've got Facebook events for each tour location. Yeah, so please get online, and it's not just for you, it's for sharing with someone, at least one other person. Bring someone along. Mm.
And as I said before, I will post all the links in the description below. And if the URLs don't show up, please just copy and paste them into a browser, and then you'll find the places that way, the
Yeah,
website and other
thank
links,
you.
other places.
Just a final thing. Sorry, just thinking about if you're inviting people. This is a meeting for everyone. So it's also a meeting for teachers, board members, people who are working in mental health, because there's a lot of people in the system who know that something's not quite right, but the policies are shutting them down. They're not going to. I heard a saying which is really powerful, which is hard on policies and soft on people. Like, we're not putting anybody on the chopping block here. This is more about the policies that are in place. So we've had people from the mental health and the medical profession coming to our meetings, and they've been really grateful. So we're not there being anti anybody. We would love to have people like that coming along as well and finding out some more.
Yeah, I mean, I agree. It's the policies that we focus on. I myself, when I'm engaging with the Christchurch City Council, it's the policies that I'm
Yeah,
focused on,
yeah,
and the policies that they're putting in place now that are disadvantaging women and girls.
yeah,
That's what I'm focused on, the policies. Yeah.
yeah. Same. Thank
Yeah.
you. Yeah.
All right, Penny,
You're
look,
doing
it was
you're
a
doing
great
great work.
chat.
Yeah.
Oh,
Thank you so much, Katrina.
likewise, yeah. And I'll hope to see you again, and hopefully anyway everyone can lots of people can come along to your meetings from here on.
Yeah,
All
great.
right.
So heading down the East Coast. Thank you so much, and we'll see some of you this week.
All right, cool. Okay, see you.
Bye.
Let me see.